Welcome to the Today's Leader podcast. Building tomorrow's best leaders, today.
Way to go, guys. Way to go. Keep it going. Good job, guys. All right, Paul, I see you. All right, Trevor. Finish. Let's go.
Great job, guys.
Hey there, it's Coach Cole here, and welcome to episode 404 of the Today's Leader podcast, Building Tomorrow's Best Leaders Today. Today, we have a very special guest, someone who joined me from the other side of Australia, Perth, WA, to be exact. Davie Deane-Spread is a former commissioned officer with the Australian Defence Forces, who then went on to a career to lead covert operations in law enforcement, before then turning his attention to the corporate world. He's held several director and CEO roles in private and public companies here in Australia and overseas. And he now operates as a masterful coach and mentor. Now, David shares some extensive insight into the development of leaders in today's episode. And he's got some really compelling models that will help you build better leadership. So after a word from our sponsor, Think and Grow Business, please welcome David to the podcast.
The podcast is brought to you by Think and Grow Business, the home of the Think and Grow Business Mastermind. If you're serious about growing your business, get serious and join a mastermind group today. Find out more at thinkandgrowbusiness.com.au.
And it's my pleasure to welcome to the Today's Leader podcast, Building Tomorrow's Best Leaders Today. Please welcome Davie Deane-Spread. How are you, David?
Oh, great. Thank you, Tony, and thanks for having me on your show. I really appreciate it.
It's a real pleasure, and I love the name of your business. It's called Metitude. Am I saying that correctly? Metitude?
Yeah, Metitude. Yep. And it's a made-up word. I made it up, and it really signifies massive attitude.
Okay, excellent. I sort of figured that with the meta, but I'm glad that my understanding of that was absolutely correct.
That's really good.
Let's share your story. What is it? Who is Davie Deane-Spread?
Yeah, I'll keep it as short as I can. It's a long story. But look, I was made in India, dropped in London, and landed in Perth by the time I was 4. I come from a family that has been in the military for generations. Firstly, in the Irish and the British forces, and then the Indian. And so I was destined to, as the eldest son, I was destined to join the military, which I did.
Okay.
And however, I realised that there's a makeup in my personality that I like rules, so that in order to break them and bending them. And I don't conform easily to regimentation.
Okay.
Which is quite interesting. And so I was I graduated and was commissioned into the military police.
Yeah.
And because of my traits, if you like, I went undercover and did covert work, and was transferred eventually into the Federal Narcotics Bureau, which is now part of the AFP, and another agency, discrete agency. In 1990, I left all that and decided that I'd be full-time into commerce.
Okay.
But along that journey, it was all about leadership, really, and leading men and women in difficult situations, high risk, high performance requirements, and there was high stakes, really, and we often made errors because we're humans. And so I learned the importance of leadership, and it became my passion to improve that. When I entered the commercial world, I realised that people were too busy focusing on profit and getting things done, and they didn't invest in leadership in the manner that I was used to.
Yeah.
So the training for leadership for me as a young platoon commander was 12 months, 24/7.
Yeah.
You know, and then I'm a junior leader.
Yeah.
And I had sergeants and warrant officers who were old enough to be my dad, guiding me in my early stages.
So it's an interesting scenario that you've gone from military into the commercial world, and that investment of leadership. I guess in the military space, leading a platoon, leading a team is almost fundamentally a life and death scenario. And it may not necessarily be seen to be a life or death scenario in the commercial world, but it can be the difference between performing and improving profit and failing, I suppose. So the investment of leaders in the commercial space is something that so many people talk about because research continues to show that it's underinvested in that particular topic. Is that what drove you into doing what it is that you do?
It really was looking at the difference between the various leaders that are out there, and I was very lucky I had a really good instructors, good people, helping me on my journey. But at the same time, I did experience leaders who I'd rather not serve with.
Yeah,
and I find that to be the case now in commerce. There are some good leaders out there, and these are the ones who are willing to keep on learning. These are the ones who care about their people as much as they care about their vision and their task and what's ahead.
Yeah,
and they're lifelong learners.
Yeah.
So they're the people that I like to champion, and I also believe that most leaders actually want to be like that.
Yeah.
But they don't know how, or they have other fears and concerns.
Yeah.
And habits.
Yeah.
That restrict them.
Yeah.
So
I would agree with that because I think I've never met a leader who puts their hand up and says, I really want to be bad at this. And I think fundamentally most people who take and accept leadership positions actually want to do a good job, but sometimes they don't have the role models within their organizations. There's limited investment within the organization. Potentially there's a company culture that gets in the way. It's focused on the wrong thing maybe. So there's a number of different avenues there that if we were looking for an excuse for leadership not being part of the solution for many organizations, there's a multitude of excuses out there. But how do we address that? How do we address that, David? How do we stop that?
It's an investment in education, and I believe that we need to begin with the employee who comes into the organisation. And I believe everyone in the organisation should be exposed to Leadership 101.
Yeah.
Because you actually, the evidence is that your very best leaders come from within the organisation.
Yeah.
And so if we were able to have every organisation had its own internal academy, if you like, and every employee gets Leadership 101 so that they actually understand what it's about, what it entails, and also whether they want to do that or not.
Yeah.
But in any event, even if they choose to say, look, I don't want to be a leader, I'd rather be a supporter, they understand what's required of the leader, and they understand how better to support that person or those people in a manner that actually enhances their own career.
Yeah. Yeah, very much so. What area do you specialise in? Is it just leadership in general, or is it top-level CEOs, or is it the emerging leaders that are coming through organisations?
Look, I get a huge amount of satisfaction out of all of those levels.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't matter whether you're a senior leader or a frontline leader. It's really about the people and how you handle people.
Mm.
I mean, there are other issues like strategic thinking and versus tactical thinking. And then you've got subject matter expertise in the technical side of things.
Yeah.
But the hard core of leadership is that people are your area of expertise.
Mm.
And learning about that, and that, we're all uniquely different, and so that's a never-ending journey. If I would need to know everyone on the planet, in order and understand them, in order to be the complete leader, and I'm not there. I'm not there yet.
Yeah,
and I've been doing this for over half a century now.
Yeah. And I suppose the good news with that is that as a leader, there's no need for you to know everyone on the planet, but there is a need for you to know your team. And
absolutely. And you've got to spend time with them.
Yeah.
You must spend time with them. You have to earn, trust is the biggest factor here.
Yeah.
And you can't do that unless you spend time with them.
Yeah.
And actually enter into real live, effective conversations with them.
Yeah.
And that you're with them, and you show that you care.
Yeah.
And I believe that I have 5C's for the earning of trust, and that is to be consistently caring, competent, courageous, and candid.
Okay.
And if you are those things, you will earn trust.
Yeah. Yeah. And even just hearing those words just resonates with me pretty deeply, to be honest, David. So leaders that care, leaders that are curious, leaders that are genuine in their approach. I've seen leaders in my career who, I'll give you a real life example. I had a leader who I was witnessing do a performance management discussion, an initial performance management discussion. Now, the organisation I was with at the time had a very clear path on how we prepare for those performance management conversations. And one of the first stages was we needed to build rapport. And this leader that I was a witness, so I wasn't saying anything, had prepared 3 or 4 very general questions. And it was almost like he ticked them off. And then the tone of the conversation immediately went from pleasantry, in inverted commas, into this is what, and I'm just sitting there going, that's not building rapport, that's not building trust, that's just ticking a box that I did the right thing. And unfortunately we do see that so often in leaders and managers. They just do something from a compliance point of view and not because of that genuine care that they should have for their team.
Yeah, and it really means that particular leader did not have the opportunity to have the right kind of development at the right time. Yeah. I mean, all problems in organisations stem from the right leader not having the right conversation with the right person at the right time in the right way. Boom. Mm-hmm. And so that doesn't happen. And
Can
so
you
the
repeat
problem
that?
becomes...
Just repeat that for me, David.
Sorry?
Just repeat that phrase again for me. I just want to take that in.
Okay, so all problems in a business are really caused, exist because the right leader failed to have the right conversation with the right person at the right time in the right way.
Yeah, yeah. That is so true. And once again, there are 43 million excuses as to why they didn't, but there's only, and fundamentally, there's the same amount of reasons why they should.
Yeah,
so,
absolutely. I mean, the reasons aren't good enough. None of them are good enough.
Yeah.
None of them are satisfactory. Yes, and even though those reasons are actually, understandably true for those people.
Yeah.
It is not an excuse.
Yeah.
There is no excuse for a leader not having that ability, and so that's missing from leadership development, big time.
Yeah.
And so that ability to have those crucial conversations, which need to be compelling, they need to be constructive, and they need to be candid.
Yeah.
At all times is because leadership takes place by conversation.
Yeah. And having the right intention around the conversation is the way to go as well. So if I've got someone who is underperforming in my team, instead of having the conversation to make them feel bad because I may think they're a bit slow or they're doing the wrong thing because they're purposely doing it, the intention fundamentally is to help them become aware that they're doing something wrong and that I'd really love to see improvement, because that's what drives the whole entire business. So the intention behind the conversation is to help them improve, as opposed to help show them the door, which, once again, a lot of leaders are quite happy to continually show people the door instead of investing in them to help them get better.
Yeah, and look, I totally agree with that, and the intention is crucial.
Yeah.
But along with the intentions have to come the feeling as though it is already happening.
Yeah.
And then the aligned actions.
Yeah.
And often that's by way of a conversation that works.
Yeah.
So, and the leaders that are quite happy to quickly replace the person that doesn't fit their requirements is one of the dumbest things you can do, and is a constant source of loss of productivity, loss of talent, cost overruns. Nothing will ever get done because everyone's learning still how to do the fundamentals.
Yeah, there's always
so
a cost.
We want to
of
retain people and turn them around.
Yeah,
and that's one of the best things that a leader can do is to convert the disenchanted or the disengaged into being enchanted and engaged.
Yeah. Let's talk about an old chestnut. Let's talk about the performance management review, because once again, this is, I saw some stats just recently, it might have been on LinkedIn, but something like 30% of employees have in the last 12 months spoken about, had a conversation around performance once in that 12 months. Yeah. And I'm going to assume, because I didn't read the whole article, I just saw the headline stat, that was a designated performance review that needed to be done for people to either get a salary adjustment or an increase, or, to plot their people on the bell curve as part of whatever system organizations use. Tell me about your thoughts that a leader should be doing in respect of, not just the performance review, but ongoing performance that you want to see from your team.
Well, I don't believe in performance reviews. I think they're crap.
Okay.
Being honest about it.
Yeah.
It's an HR compliance thing that kind of gives them something to do. And leaders that believe in that are... And I don't know a leader or a team member who loves performance reviews. Let's have a performance review. Yeah. So, and I think that the best way around it is to have an ongoing conversation with your, and this is where the leader gets to know their team and is up close and personal without being micromanaging, but to have a conversation on a fairly regular basis. How's it going?
Yeah.
What have you achieved this week that you plan to achieve? What have you not yet got to because of, for whatever reason? What resources do you need to make things happen for you that you haven't got? How can I help you? Things like that. And those conversations, let's go and have a cup of coffee and see how things are going. Or I've noticed that, you were doing this and now you're doing that. Help me understand your choices for doing that. So giving them power all the time. Yeah. And asking questions all the time so that they own the answer.
Yeah.
But at no time do we need to say, you're not doing this and you're not. If you're getting to that point, then you're the one who's failed, not them.
Yeah, that's a great way to think about it, because it's absolutely true, isn't it? If
Totally.
the leader gets to the point where they're giving them a list of things that they haven't done, or in what I've seen is they've stored them up for the annual performance review. So they haven't addressed it in a timely manner, but then they sit down at the performance review and say, 6 months ago at 3 p.m. on the Thursday, you did this, and that there is nothing more demoralising for culture or feeling of value from both the leader and the person who's having that particular performance review.
Absolutely, and it's soul destroying, and it's I don't know that it happens all that often.
Yeah,
but boy, when it does, it would be happening with that particular leader. It would be happening a lot. It wouldn't be just with one person.
Yeah,
it would be his or her modus operandi.
Yeah. Let's look at succession planning, because I guess part of the HR process of performance reviews is about how do we plan our talent pipeline? How do we assess them, and how do we put them into the succession plan? So I can certainly understand that there's a need for some formality around who's going to be your bright people. But what should organisations look for when it comes to promoting people, promoting leaders and moving them up the chain? What are some of those key traits that you see that organisations should be encouraging and looking for?
Well, I think that the one that matters the most, in my humble opinion, is for the team member who's willing to help other team members. That willingness to help.
Yeah,
that is so. I mean, and in the military, we did that. We had each other's backs.
Yeah,
and it didn't have to be just a platoon commander, but the most junior soldier would be willing to help. Yeah, and we're all willing to help one another. And when I'm looking for leadership, I'm looking for people who are willing to help.
Okay, and once again, that's about caring for the team and helping and supporting others.
It's the most important. It's the most important part, because it's all about leadership. Is about people. Yeah, management's about things and stuff and tasks and measurement and resources, and most of us have to do both. Yeah, but the leadership component it's 100% about people. And when they say, I'm a people manager, cut the crap. You're not. You can't manage people. You can only lead them or not. Yeah.
Yet often that same language is used to describe great football coaches, isn't it? They're a good people manager. Well, no,
that's ignorance.
Yeah.
To me, that's ignorance. They haven't done enough thinking about it. And look, it requires thinking. Thinking is so important, and then thinking effectively therefore becomes crucial. Yeah. And too many of us are thinking on automatic instead of thinking on manual. Yeah. And I always try and let people have the felt experience of what it's like to think on manual versus thinking on automatic. Yeah. Yeah. And there are many, many ways of demonstrating that to them.
Yeah. Conscious leadership, being conscious in your approach, being intentional in your approach is just really, really one of those hallmarks that I see great leaders do. They're consciously working on, and once again, a great example, there's a lady in my network, she's very much the D style leader. She's very direct. She's very task orientated. She's very results focused. And she knows that when she's working with people, that sometimes her behaviour and personality takes a back seat to the results. So she understands that. She actually makes notes in her diary. So if someone was heading off for a break to see the relatives interstate or something, she would make a note in the diary on the day that they get back, just so that that's there as a prompt, so she doesn't get straight to business. She will mention how are the grandkids, or, those sorts of things. She'll have that conversation, even though because of her style, it can be quite confronting and uncomfortable for her. But she knows the importance of it for people. So she has adapted how she works to do things like that. And I think that's a great sign of really good leadership.
I think that's wonderful, and that's a good example of how we can, in fact, be conscious, self-aware,
Yeah.
and then take action to recognise our traits that we'd like to modify,
Yeah.
and then set up little things like reminders in the diary, which helps us to jog our memory, little nudges, as they call them
Yeah.
now.
Yeah.
We're talking about succession,
Yeah.
succession planning, and one of the things that, and I know that HR and leadership in general, they do think about that, but I don't believe it's deep enough, and it goes deep enough in the organisation, and so most succession planning is a plan if it's done in any level of detail.
Yeah.
But the plan's not good enough. There has to be succession practice.
Okay.
And they don't, and that's where they slip up. And so the normally, if we've got a succession plan, we'll put the person who's one of the people who might be the next leader, will step in when that leader gets seconded or is on leave or sick or whatever. I don't believe that should happen. I think the leader should spend a week every maybe 6 weeks stepping aside, and everyone goes up one. And that leader then is there and coaching. And then so he's on the ground or she's on the ground, able to render assistance should it be needed, but everyone's stepped up.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I don't, it's a simple thing to do.
Succession
but it's not
practice. Done. Yeah, that's a good colleague of mine, a good mate of mine always talks about you've got to act as if. You've got to act as if. You've got to understand what the traits and characteristics, behaviours and leadership abilities that is required in your next role up. And then part of his process was always about you've got to act as if you're in that role. So you've got to show the requirements for the role, even though you're doing the role that's not necessarily at that level at that particular time. But I like that concept of succession practice, because it's real time. You're developing a coaching organisation or a coaching mentality or a mindset around the business that people are going to be challenged and stepping up into bigger roles, and they're going to be coached through it. And
absolutely.
Which is so much better than just saying, here you go, here's the keys for 3 weeks and sink or swim, and then judgments made on that succession plan, on that succession, on that secondment.
And they're very aware that if they make an error, it's going to be a black mark,
Yeah.
And yet errors are wonderful opportunities.
Very much so.
But it's an interesting thing. But there are 4 things that I think that matter. The first 3 are what I call the deadly triad.
Yeah.
And that leaders need to be equipped to be able to deal with these things. The first one is the dysfunctional behaviour, unacceptable behaviour.
Yeah.
That sucks up so much energy, demoralising, impacts on the culture, impacts on performance and productivity. And so the leader needs to know how to deal with the unacceptable behaviour and maintain trust and respect at the same time.
Yeah, yeah.
The second one that's a problem is the reality that the leadership cohort, that's from the front line to the top, is nowhere near as aligned as they think they are. And that needs to be tested. And they would get a shock if they realised how misaligned, in fact, they really are. Not intentionally, but unintentionally.
Yeah.
And the cost of that to the organisation can be prodigious.
Yeah, I'd imagine.
And the third one is how work gets done is through delegation. And I'm very clear that most delegation that takes place is not as good as it could be.
Yeah.
And I believe that not only should the leader be taught how to delegate effectively with a complete delegation framework, but every member of the team should too, so that they know what questions to ask. Should they feel that there's a gap somewhere in the delegation itself?
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, those three things. And the fourth one that made us, and we'll all laugh at this one, is, hey, how to run a proper meeting. Because that's where everything happens. You know? And so if you look at those four areas, managing behaviours, leadership alignment, effective delegation, and effective meeting practice, you cannot help but improve the organisation very measurably. And I know that in a 90-day period, with about 200 staff, I can get a 20% improvement in performance and productivity through working through empowering the leadership to be able to do that. Yeah,
yeah. And that's, I'm just sitting here laughing to myself because I've run some shocking meetings in my time, I can tell you.
Oh, we all have. We all have.
But you learn from them and you understand what it is that, to be effective, and to think of the amount of wasted time in organisations in relation to meetings that don't end up with an outcome.
It's sad because there's a lot of talent going to waste.
Yeah,
a lot of resources going to waste, a lot of time going to waste.
Very much so. David, who's influenced you during your leadership journey?
Look, my earliest heroes were my parents.
Yeah.
Dad had 3 jobs, Mum had 2.
Oh, wow.
There's 5 jobs between us.
Yeah.
And between them, because we've 4 kids, some of them had health problems, and that was pretty expensive. And so their work ethic, their care for us, the love that we got from them, and their championing of us to do better, and the sacrifice they gave to give us the best education they could, well beyond their capability, with 1 job each. Yeah. So that really inspired me. But then in my military training, a particular officer, Peter Schumann, who's since passed away, won an MC in Vietnam. He was in the SAS. Yeah. Who became clients of mine not long ago. The way he handled himself, the way he led us, the way he mentored me through my rebellious, anti-rule, anti-discipline type traits, and kept me on the straight and narrow, and actually enabled me to graduate. Yeah. I'll never forget, Yeah. And he showed care, he showed resilience. He put his troops in front of himself, before himself. Yeah. He was just a wonderful man. Yeah. And so I wanted to do that my way, of course, to become an individual. And that's the standard that I want to hold myself to. Yeah, absolutely. When you get a really good, strong role model in your life, whether it's, the parents and the upbringing, and then you have a strong identity around leadership, it can certainly help you in so many aspects, and not just from your own career. It helps you in the way that we deal with things in our personal lives. So I think both of those areas that you've spoken about there in inspiration is awesome. What about failure? Let's talk about failure, and it's something. I'm pretty good at it. Yeah, a lot of it's one thing that some leaders try to hide from, so they don't risk anything because they know that failure is going to have ramifications on them. But tell me about your relationship with failure. It's pretty intense. I am a risk taker. It's part of my profile.
Yeah.
And so I'll do things. I'll try and chew off more than I, can at that time.
Yeah.
Or I'll make a mistake through ignorance. I did that most noticeably. I have experienced a $6.5 million bankruptcy.
Okay.
And by doing, by thinking I was bulletproof,
Yeah.
by a very fundamental thing, like instead of putting an option to purchase subject to finance, I put down a deposit on a contract of sale to buy businesses. And then I went around raising the funds,
Yeah.
underwriting, got the underwriting, and then the crash came and the underwriting was pulled away because that was an escape clause. If the market goes up or down by 20%,
Yeah.
they're out, the underwriters are out. So I'm left carrying the can, and I had to negotiate my way out of, I had no way of completing the contracts. And so I lost all my deposit. That was my only way out. Give them keep your deposit and run away.
Yeah.
Keep your business, keep your deposit.
Yeah.
And I was left at that time with a sizable debt, in which I couldn't service. So I declared myself bankrupt. No one made me go bankrupt, and it was all my own doing.
Yeah.
Wonderful learning, though.
Yeah.
But it gave me the opportunity to do some things to tick off some bucket list things. Like, when I went bankrupt, I had nothing. It was all gone. It even cost me my marriage.
Yeah.
But I had the time then to reflect, the time to do some things that I hadn't had the time to do. Mastering the didgeridoo was one of them.
Wow.
And that making and playing.
Yeah.
And and that's a big source of relaxation for me, is to play the didgeridoo. So,
Oh,
it's
wow.
kind of a meditation for me. So yes, there's lots of learning. So out of all failure comes also enormous rewards,
Yeah.
enormous learning.
And now,
And so I'm not
it's time
scared
for
to
Tony's
fail,
2 cents.
Yeah.
but I'm very attentive to the causes of them and my part in that.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
most of all, it was mainly my part.
Yeah. You,
So I'm
you've
okay
mentioned
with it,
You've mentioned a couple of times the rule breaking, the risk taking. What sort of a profile? And also then you've talked about courageous leadership. And there may be some people here taking all that on board, that it all means very similar things. So as a leader, we would encourage a level of risk taking and rule breaking, because sometimes we've got to challenge and stretch the status quo. But what is the line with that? I mean, I know it's really difficult to get the definitive line, but
I think there are some real. I think there's some real guides there. I think risk taking is fine. Measure it carefully.
Yeah.
Risk mitigation is also okay, but not to the point where there's no point in doing it.
Yeah.
I mean, the safest thing they say is to do nothing. Well, that's not going to go anywhere.
Yeah.
So take the risk, but measure it carefully. Look at the possibilities. Look at the potential consequences, and what can we do to mitigate it if one of those aspects, or one or more of those aspects, were to come into play.
Yeah.
And so when we were planning operations, which are high risk,
Yeah.
we would look at what happens in the worst case scenario: injury, somebody losing their life, or collateral damage of some sort, or loss of key assets.
Yeah.
What we do in that case. And then what we would do is we would rehearse, we would practice and drill the whole operation from the very get-go to the very end. So we had the whole team was involved, and so we knew what to do. Now, we had the luxury of doing that. In fact, it was not a luxury so much, it was an absolute requirement. You don't go in to those sorts of situations unprepared, untrained, unrehearsed. We can do that also with M&As, mergers and acquisitions.
Yeah. Yeah.
We can do that. We actually have the time to do that.
Yeah.
And so that's not done that well at all. And so
Yeah.
most of them are 70% failure rate, in fact.
Yeah.
or mergers and acquisitions, because they don't do that. We don't have a 70% failure rate of our operations in those days. We'd have bungles that take place.
Yeah.
We'd have incidents, things would happen.
Yeah.
But the operation would still continue.
Yeah. Yeah.
So there's that in terms of risk. In terms of rule breaking, there are ethical boundaries there. And when I say rule breaking, I mean rule bending. In other words, there are general principles and guide rails that we follow around which we won't go beyond.
Yeah.
But if I have to modify it slightly because the status quo is no longer appropriate, then I will modify it, but within the boundaries, the strict boundaries of our values, right? So, and this is where judgment and discernment is a big part of what a leader needs to learn, and it's a skill, it's a learnable skill. But having a strong sense of values, all of them, and not a bias towards one in particular, but a very balanced view of all of them. And how we're going to bend the rules when we need to. Look, if the rules are working, follow them. But when you have the situation where the rule doesn't apply, vary it. To deal with that status quo problem.
Great
and
advice.
recognise that so long as it's within the boundaries of our values.
Great advice. Absolutely. David, what's the vision for yourself moving forward?
I'm actually well and truly on that journey, and the vision is for me to not only help as many leaders as I can, but to actually leave a legacy where leadership has been exampled, and I'm doing that in real life with a cattle stud that I've just kicked off.
Wow! Yeah,
and I'm also the CEO and co-founder of a biotech that's we've just relaunched. We're only in our 60-day scenario.
Okay.
Very soon, the world will hear about it because I'll be hunting for fun. And so that's a start-up, right? So it's going to have all the difficulties, all the challenges that my clients have had and do have. And I'll be doing it, and I'll be saying, "Look, this is how we're doing it. This is how I'm doing it." And once we get into action mode, I'll create a blog, and so that'll be a learning place for my clients and anyone else who wants to.
That'll be excellent. Yeah, looking forward to hearing the story as we move through. So, David, it's been. How can people connect with you? Sorry, I almost missed them. One of the most important questions is going to be.
Okay. I mean, I'm the only Davie Deane-Spread on planet Earth, so you can Google me easily and find my LinkedIn profile where all my contact details are there, or people can go to my Metitude site. That's metitude.com. metatude.com. Or you can give me a call on my mobile number. I'll take the call.
Okay. Excellent.
But look, to be fair, and full disclosure, at the moment I am fully booked. I will take calls, but I won't be able to take on any new work for a couple of months at least.
But I guess as you start to move into the biotech and you start putting the blog out, if people know how to be connected with you, at least they'll be able to follow that journey. So I think that's an awesome part of
absolutely
what people can look forward to. David, it's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you, Tony.
Having you today on the Today's Leader podcast, and thank you so much for investing in the leaders of today.
Thank you very much, Tony. It's been a real pleasure.
And now, it's time for Tony's 2 cents.
Let's talk the 5C's. Consistently caring, competent, courageous, and candid. Now, that's a blueprint that I believe any leader can take on board. Any leader at every level can take on board. And for me, I think the key C is consistently. Now, For some leaders, that's what they miss. The consistency of being a leader, the consistency required, the behaviours, the traits, the standards of performance. Now, anyone can lift for selected events, but can you be consistent in what it is that you deliver? That consistently is a key component to the 5C's. Consistently, caring, competent, courageous, and candid. So if you apply that, the 5C's, into your leadership, or at least have some awareness in relation to it, I have got no doubt that by applying the 5C's to your traits and behaviours, you have the foundation of becoming a really great leader. And that's just a great model. The 5C's is a really good model. It's not hard, it's simple, and ultimately, if you can take that on board with your behaviours, your traits, and the way you perform and lead, I think you are well placed to prepare for being one of tomorrow's best leaders. Thanks, David, for investing in today's leaders, and of course his links are in the show notes. If you're looking to build better leadership skills, check out the Today's Leader website at todaysleader.com.au. We really are driving a leadership revolution to build tomorrow's best leaders today. Today's Leader is a collective, the mindset to make a difference, the ability to create an impact. Think and Grow Business hosts our Today's Leader Mastermind. Think and Grow Business, where we focus on personal, professional, and business growth. Book your free 30-minute discovery call right from the homepage at thinkandgrowbusiness.com.au. Don't forget, wherever you are standing stronger, braver, and wiser. Don't forget the golden rule. Don't be an arsehole. I'll see you all again next week. Bye for now.